This is likely to be a controversial video. Indeed, I hope it will be, as I'm likely to burn some bridges with this, but the topic must be raised. And if not now, then when? If not me, then who? But before we get into the drama of it all, I would like to begin with a retrospective to set the stage. For you see, Warhammer, the reason why I'm doing this, the passion for the setting, well, it was the reason I started doing YouTube many years ago. I was so excited, you see, for the recently announced Total War Warhammer, a match made in heaven as far as I was concerned, that I just had to talk about it. I wanted to be a part of the discussion. In many ways, that and the YouTube channel was the culmination of years of passion for Warhammer. An interest kindled ever since I was gifted a Chaos Dwarf Army book by my grandmother, who had no idea what this was, and I had no idea what this was. But I devoured it. Literally read it until it started to fall apart. A fate shared by many such books later, as I immediately went looking for more. This was at a time when nobody here in Norway had any idea what a Warhammer was. The initial army books I could get a hold of were sold in toy stores, because the people buying it up thought that, oh, these are the toys for little children. I'm grateful to that fact, but eventually I had to start ordering army books from England directly, still with very little clue as to what all of this really was. All I knew was that I loved the universe, and I wanted more of it. A Wood Elf Codex and a Skaven Codex were next, also read until they fell apart, and I feel like even today, I could recount the events of Athelloren's Winter of Woes, or the Black Plague that ravaged the Empire, by heart. In other words, Warhammer was an amazing setting, and had me hooked. It inspired tremendous passion in me and many others, as I eventually discovered 40k and other fans of it too. It was immediately clear to me that this was a fandom defined by passion, the friendliest I've ever encountered, as it had a shared love for it all, to the point where today it is a meme that any fan of 40k can talk your ears off about it for hours. And considering I myself have produced literally thousands of hours of lore videos about it, yeah, the meme is very much so real. But modern day Warhammer is a very different thing. It is not in a healthy place. And I don't mean economically, mind you, as GW stocks are up and will continue to climb for quite some time yet. Because Warhammer 40k is closer than it has ever been to going mainstream. And with the upcoming Amazon TV show, it is all but guaranteed that the long-cherished dream of GW will be fulfilled. This, however, is a deal with the devil. A Faustian bargain where Games Workshop sells the very soul of Warhammer in return for short-term riches. Significant riches, make no mistake. But like the Midas touch, they will in the end be a curse upon 40k. We can all see it. Fans, both old and new, with genuine enthusiasm for the setting, cannot help but notice how much less 40k the setting has become. Or the simple outright murder, of course, of Warhammer Fantasy, and the replacement of it by an infinitely inferior and more banal setting, a more sanded down setting with a much less character and uniqueness to it, not to mention far less in the way of grim, dark terror. For what once literally coined the term grim dark, Warhammer 40,000 has now transformed into a strangely twisted hope-punk setting, where innumerable armies of new space marines, better than ever, hidden away in magical vaults created by a walking deus ex machina, march in legion strength, led by plot-twisted, resurrected Primarchs as they reverse the greatest victory in Chaos history. A victory, by the way, that was near entirely glossed over. Cadia fell in 13 pages. The entire 40k universe was upended, and Chaos's greatest, most glorious moment was simply just over in a heartbeat. Before any one of us could even blink, we'd moved on to an entire new era of 40,000, 1,000 years in the future. To call the gathering storm rushed and undercooked would be like calling a rotten roadkill by the side of the road a pinch poorly heated. And more importantly, the gathering storm was near completely deprived of the passion that once made Warhammer great. It was self-evident in the storytelling and how little of there it was, compared to virtually every other era of 40k, or even to Warhammer Legends, or to the Horus Heresy. The Gathering Storm was in many ways the death knell of the last passion from GW towards their setting. And hey, we don't even need to get into the esoteric mysteries of lore to demonstrate 40k's decline. Warhammer Plus is the very pinnacle example of GW's failings in the eyes of its fans. Imagine going back in time, 15, 20 years, and saying, in the future, there will be dozens of 40k animated shows. Even full-on CGI movies about space marines so cool, it will even have the normies interested. You could not even imagine a scenario back then where each and every one of us would not have been glued to such a service. GW even, of course, secured some absolutely amazing talent, like the creator of Astartes, Seema Pedersen. But the predatory and straight-up threatening way in which they did it, well, today, not only are we not glued to it, but Warhammer Plus is known mostly for failure after failure, and as an absolute PR disaster. Its battle reports are outcompeted by random YouTubers. Its Lore Masters show is the shallowest, baby's first 40k lore to have ever cursed the internet since TikTok. And its flagship animated series, plagued by delays and disappointment, on top of the enormous drama of GW threatening to sue fan creators and forcing them to sign unreasonable contracts to work for GW officially. Contracts that practically all of them resented and fled within a year. Even now, in a desperate attempt to prop up the failure of Warhammer Plus, GW continues to make anti-fan moves, like taking their Army Builder app and placing it behind the Warhammer Plus paywall. And this is all to say that Games Workshop has become actively hostile towards its own fans. A thing clear for all to see, as the company desperately tries to rid itself of all of us who made 40k what it was, eager to replace us with the promised hordes of the wider audience, casuals that Amazon has promised them. And they will come. GW's market cap will skyrocket. But just like 40k is now set to cannibalize the corpse of Star Wars, which went through much this precise same trajectory with Disney, a niche entity, a cultural phenomenon picked up by a larger company that pivoted to sell it to the widest possible audience. This necessitated the watering down of what was, the casualization and broadening of appeal, until Star Wars was no longer Star Wars, just a shadow of its former self, a corpse to be cannibalized. And soon enough, something else will come up to cannibalize the corpse of Warhammer 40,000. And once, not so long ago, I thought that was inevitable, that the course was set in stone. But I have changed my mind somewhat on this. I think there is still a way to save 40k. But to do that, we are going to have a tough talk about the community. And specifically about those who have a unique responsibility to 40k and the universe we all supposedly love, the content creators. If you've survived this lengthy preamble, which, as much as I tried to cut down, I felt was fundamentally necessary to the heart of this video, then, well, firstly, congratulations. And secondly, if the video also reaches its intended audience, you may not agree with me on much, politically speaking at least. But I hope that as fellow fans of Warhammer 40,000, you will still consider what I have to say. As it has been my conclusion now that Warhammer 40,000's online creator community is infested. Parasites and leeches feeding off a body that they too already know to be dying and yet are doing nothing to stop the decay. Worse, through action and inaction, they are cementing the inevitable death of the grimdark universe. This is obviously a very severe condemnation, as it suggests that the astounding majority of 40k content creators are not merely passive participants in the decline of the franchise, along for the ride, so to say, but an active and willing source of the rot infesting the thing we all proclaim to love. It is not an accusation I make lightly, and it is one I have agonized over making for the last few months, wondering if there is any point, or if it is just drama mongering, or if it is all just pointless in the end, that I am struggling futilely. But it is an accusation I must make, lest I be just as culpable as those I now criticize. But enough bloviating, let's get to the meat of the matter finally. Why reduce the dozens of 40k content creators with a combined fan base in the millions to nothing more than carrion creatures feasting on a corpse they helped slay? The accusation stems from a realization I had in the wake of information I received from an anonymous source about the actions of the lead editor of the Warhammer 40,000 community site. I made a video on that, which I would suggest you watch for the full context. But the short version is this. A GW employee, Tom Mendelsohn, was writing some pretty disgusting comments about Charlie Kirk in the immediate aftermath of his death. Further information provided to me by the anonymous source also claimed and substantiated that this GW employee had been instrumental in the politicization of Games Workshop in a left-wing direction, including writing the infamous "The Imperium is driven by hate, Warhammer is not" article, a piece that demonstrated a fundamental lack of understanding of Warhammer 40,000, and was written in response to the equally infamous Austrian painter incident. This article was viewed by many as an explicit admission by GW that they had now fully entered the culture war, and its allegiance was left. It was willing to denounce its own most popular factions, the Space Marines and Imperium at large, as nothing more than xenophobic bigots, evil for the sake of it, rather than for the sake of survival. I also received screenshots showing that Tom apparently hated conservatives in general, all of them, and tried to get others in GW fired for their politics, along with numerous other hideous statements he made in private. Whatever thin shred of doubt about GW's leanings that remained after the Warhammer 40k is for everyone, and if you don't agree, you will not be missed article, quite possibly another brainchild of Tom, had by now completely disappeared. Games Workshop had chosen their side, or so at least it appeared at first. But now, with the revelation that the Warhammer community editor was directly behind this, in addition to the doubling down on female custodies that have always been female custodies tweets, and that he had also engaged in several in-house campaigns to actively get rid of non-left-wing employees in GW, whilst also hiring his own political comrades, well, it looked now as if the root of the problem had actually been identified. Tom has a history of actions taken to politicize 40k, explicitly so, and a clearer target has rarely, if ever, presented itself. An opportunity to de-radicalize Games Workshop at the very source. And even if Tom was not alone in this, and I guarantee you he was not, his summary dismissal would send a strong internal message that the role of the company is to make Warhammer, not politics. I made as much noise as I could about this, organized an email campaign on it that resulted in thousands of emails, and eventually got a response from GW that this was indeed not acceptable behavior, and that Tom was suspended. But there was no official statement, no actual firing as of yet. Tom's LinkedIn page simply says, potentially looking for the next step. Best case scenario then, he is still suspended, but not fired. Worst case scenario, he is simply on paid vacation until he can be brought back in. Why would GW do this? Why would a company so eagerly cling onto a person who should, by all rights, be an enormous PR hazard, as well as a known political activist within the company? Well, it reminded me of several other messages I had received too, from people within GW who claimed that the plan was to simply shut up and bunker down. Wait out the controversy, as they were certain it would not attract over much attention. Which seemed crazy. This was a far larger piece of drama than the Austrian painter could ever be. A far larger piece of drama than that which caused the Warhammer is for Everyone campaign. And yet, I said back then, maybe they are right. And I say right now, they were right. As I have seen hardly anyone else cover this. None of the lore channels, Luton, Voldemort, 40k Theories, etc. Major Kill is more worried at the moment about being replaced by AI, and, well, that is a legitimate worry for him, I do suppose. And even the channels that in essence just cover GW directly, like Chapter Master Valrak or Kirioth, for example, have also had nothing to say on the matter. Rarely, if ever, have we seen in any community such a dereliction of duty, a demonstration of a lack of passion or interest in 40k's health and well-being, as those who have built careers, livelihoods of claiming to love 40k are now standing by and doing nothing to stop its decline. Worse still, their deliberate inaction and in many cases uncritical cheerleading, their toxic positivity and defense of even the most ridiculous of GW's decisions is directly responsible for the decline. As GW, as a company, will always seek to get away with the scummiest behavior it can. It is the fans, and more pressingly so, the community leaders' responsibility to push back on it. And in a time where GW can launch 250 plus lawsuits in a weekend, including suing a Battletech Warhammer mech model, clearly the community has not held GW to any sort of accountability for a long time, as the company has no fear at all of receiving any meaningful backlash. But why is this the case? And why should they? Why should all of these other channels cover this? Who am I to dictate what other people cover, after all? And how could ignoring this one case be enough to justify such a litany of damning accusations that I made just now? It is quite simple. If you asked pretty much any of these content creators if 40k is better today than it was before, they would say no. We might have different favorite periods, but it is very difficult indeed to argue that Warhammer is getting better, or that it has a bright future as a universe ahead of it. If you further ask them if real-life politics should be a part of 40k, most of them would yet again say no. And those who may not, like Oculus Imperia, well, it is because Tom Mendelsohn represents them. Tom is their politics. It is their side. And the left is ever famous for its tribal nature. And as I have stated before, the definition of a tourist is a person that values their real-life personal politics more than their escapism. Fortunately, though, the tourists are still quite rare, or so at least we continue to think. And you will be hard-pressed today to find a Warhammer fan that does not go all doughy-eyed and nostalgic at what Warhammer was, how it felt better, looked better. That's why I've chosen to run some very old footage in the background. And as for politics, again, with the exception of those who see themselves in Tom and his goals to politicize 40k, nobody wants politics, real-life politics, in Warhammer. And the two are not separate. Politics is a key component of what has made 40k less 40k. Not just in the major controversies like female custodies or the ever-present spectre of female space marines, but in the unending softening of 40k. As they said in the Warhammer is for everyone spiel, we will continue to diversify the cast of characters so everyone can find representation. True fans will remember the meme, you get sent to your favorite fantasy universe. Actual 40k fans don't actually want to be in 40k. And if the Space Marines are half as fascist and evil as GW claims them to be, I'm not sure I want them to be my representation either. And a failure to push back on all of this is the single greatest disservice anyone can do the setting, as at its very heart, 40k is inherently, explicitly, a right-wing setting. This is why the left-wing influences are so corrosive. Indeed, it is so obvious, it is right there in the opening blurb. Abandon the false promises of progress. And in its slogans, an open mind is like a fortress with its gate unbarred and unguarded. Any element of modern-day progressivism inserted into a setting like this, like gender representation through female space marines, to take the most popular example, will inevitably, intrinsically be toxic to the setting as a whole. Progressivism is simply immiscible with 40k. And we could go on to list all of the examples, like the reaction to female custodies, or the clear tonal shift in 40k from one of hopeless decline to Primarchs popping out of the woodworks. Or we could belabor the numberless examples of wokeism destroying entities in gaming, in movies, in TV, etc., etc. But this horse has long since been beaten into submission. It does not need reiteration here, as the inescapable fact is that the left wing's need to force its agenda into everything it touches has near universally been a disaster. And there is no indicator that 40k will magically somehow be different. In fact, quite the absolute opposite. This fact has been exhaustively documented again and again and again, to the point now where ignorance is simply no longer a defense. One must ask oneself then, do I want 40k to get better? Would I like it to remain 40k? Because if the answer is yes, then this was the time. This was the opportunity to do something that might, probably even, actually matter. And it would not even have taken a political stance to do so. All it would have taken was to condemn a man dancing on the corpse of a murdered conservative. This should be a simple and self-evidently moral stance in and of itself. But GW was right. That was, in fact, too much to ask. Those with the power to change things, perhaps the only ones with that power, the community leaders, have demonstrated no intent in doing so. And thus, Games Workshop will, of course, simply continue on its current path, actively alienating its fans, destroying the setting, and waging legal war against STL makers, animators, modelers, and anyone else GW so much as suspects might be cutting into their ever-expanding sphere of interest. As even just a few weeks ago, we learned about an alleged attempt not to enforce copyright, but to declare the very production of models compatible with 40k, that could be used in games of 40k, to be in and of itself a legal violation of GW's rights. Utterly and obviously absurd, but if there are no consequences for such actions, if there are none willing to wield an effective stick, then, well, why not take them? And again, no consequences are being forced upon GW, even as, with the Tom case, there was an eager and ready opportunity to make a company capitulate on a meaningful matter. And do not make the mistake of thinking the two separate again. GW's repeated misuses of the legal system and their self-professed adherence to progressive politics have much in common, in that the politics are there to clear GW's backs, to give them safety in perceived virtue from the group of people who have demonstrated their ability to affect companies via threats of cancellation. Meanwhile, our side, complaining about increasing model costs or shitty legal practices, whilst sound complaints to have within our own sphere, matters not one iota to the company. They are planning to ditch us all anyway. So if there was to be any hope of change, we had to get a stick large enough, an equivalent stick. And here we had a golden chance to do just that, strike them in the same way the left has done, with threats of public and very serious condemnation. And again, not for some made-up nonsense like racism, or there being too many white space marines, or sexism because the poster boys aren't poster girls, but for a genuine, ghastly, and immoral action taken by someone the company pays, tolerates, and promotes. The time to act has come, and the time to act has gone. For now, at least. And so we must then try to figure out why that was the case. So, as I have already expansively laid out the case for why to act, namely love of 40k, let's look at the reasons not to act, so as to illustrate why the moment passed, as I have a pretty good idea as to what defenses from the various creators would be. Like, well, I can't change anything, so why even try? Ye old why bother voting? My single vote can't magically win elections. The idiocy of this. Correct. Change does not magically happen at the snap of a finger. It takes time and effort. When I started commenting on the politics invading 40k, I was in the minority. I still am in the minority when it comes to 40k commentators. I spent 10 plus years with the constant threat of cancellation and the obvious disadvantages placed upon my YouTube career to help, alongside many others, to change the culture. And now, it can clearly be said that my side has a significant upper hand in the culture wars. But guess what? It did not happen overnight, and it was not easy. Nothing worth doing ever is. But if one never does anything, even especially when what needs to be done is so small and easy, then yes, indeed, you can not change anything because you cannot do anything. Or, oh, I don't want to do politics. Well, fortunately, you don't have to. Again, I've already done all of the politics. I have already explained all of the reasons we do is encourage GW to not engage in politics as well. A seemingly obvious and self-serving goal if one indeed truly did not want to do politics. Or a slight variation, oh, but I'm afraid politics will take over my channel. How? The entire point of this would be to drive politics out of 40k, to signal to DW they cannot allow themselves to be made into political pawns. And if this really was a genuine fear, then surely everyone would be fighting even more so, tooth and nail, to rid GW of that very politics. It is nothing more than an excuse to be allowed to continue to take advantage of all the actions that have already been taken to try and depoliticize 40k, whilst not actually having to do anything or take a stance. A cowardly avoidance of the consequences of doing what is obviously the right thing. Or, I don't care about politics. I know. That was me. Again, 10 years ago. As I learned that no matter how little I might care about politics, politics does care about me, whether I would like it to or not. Sticking one's head into the sands as an ostrich and simply pretending everything is fine is rarely a functional strategy. And the simple fact is, we have identified the thing that makes 40k worse. The trajectory is clear. It is Disney's Star Wars' trajectory. 40k will all the individuality ground down as obstacles to appeal to a wider audience. And slowly, as the thing that once made 40k into 40k are all sanded down and sanitized, it will die. Not tomorrow, not next year. This decline is measured in decades. If the Henry Cavill TV show is great, it will take 20 years, maybe 30, before the wider audience, the people who were never fans at all, having finally gotten their bland, vaguely 40k-shaped slop, will wonder why this boring, generic old thing was ever popular in the first place, and walk away to embrace the next hot thing. It is what is happening to Star Wars right now. It is what will happen to 40k later. We can all see it, and all those who refuse to do anything about it now are nothing more than leeches clamped onto a corpse, fully aware that something could be done, and easily so, but still unwilling to do it. One would think if one truly loved a thing, one would be willing to defend it, to try and make it better. A foreign terrain for the majority of 40k channels either. Simple short-sightedness is not a defense, nor is ignorance, as practically all have commented on female space marines or the Femstories retcon, disturbingly often in favor of them, and suspiciously singing from the same hymn sheet. Oh, 40k has always been fluid in its lore. It's for inclusivity, and besides, why do you even care? GW can change anything at any time, etc., etc., etc. Or most perfidious of all, people like the Templin Institute in the past that quite infamously declared that there is no such thing as canon. A patently idiotic position that cannot survive 5 seconds of scrutiny, yet is also disturbingly frequent amongst many people who claim to be fans of a thing that according to themselves don't actually exist. Anyone who believes that canon is irrelevant to a universe, to a setting, might as well go out into the forest and talk about the leaves and the streams and the rocks, as they should hold the exact same significance to them as 40k. Because if there is no canon, there is no universe. But if a lot of all of these excuses are invalid, as I believe them to be, why are people doing all of this? Why are people covering 40k whilst demonstrating a lack of actual interest in it? Well, a lot of people are doing this solely for self-enrichment, grifters in the most literal sense of the word. Others, like Oculus Imperia, at least genuinely believe their views will make for a better world, a better 40k. They are wrong, and blatantly, demonstrably so, but at least they are not guilty of the sin of moral cowardice that many others are. For if you truly love 40k, if you profess to do so, you could not possibly sit by and do nothing. I know, because that was me. I was in that position. For of course, you see, another argument might well be, if in a moment of honesty they would admit it, that the primary motivation is not love of Warhammer, but money, and that money, well, it is best earned by staying firmly on the company's good side, to critique just enough to not be a clear-cut shill, to put on the sheep's clothing, but never critique so much as is to make the company look overly bad, or more precisely, never criticize something that might lead to real embarrassment and pressure, like the Tom Mendelsohn situation would have. If we take that into consideration, we might have a fine reason there alone for why no one spoke out. Indeed, we even have a direct, recent behind-the-scenes example with a recent Major Kill drama, who, whilst responding to a video by the Pontius, explained on his Discord how making videos asking for people to do better will cap channel growth, and that there is not a huge audience for culture war basement dwellers. Wiki-tubers like Major Kill are in this not for the passion or the love of 40k, but because it is an easy grift. And he has said on multiple occasions that he just wants as many people into 40k as possible. Not because it will make the hobby healthier, we know it will do quite the opposite, but because it is good for his personal profits. which is also what caused him to rush out a Space King lore video explaining the lore in total, but missed out on so much and got so much outright wrong in it that he had to admit it later in a comment, stating that he hadn't actually watched where the majority of the lore came from because he never cared. There is no passion there, only an urge to shill supplements and to ask that he be allowed to make Space King models. The clearest, most obvious grift ever seen. Now granted, very few stoop to that level, but we also have quite a few other content creators today who are probably under contract with Games Workshop. Contracts with extensive defamation sections and long expiry times. The morality and wisdom of signing a contract with a company like GW is questionable. But then again, morality is a foreign word to many, and it would be more fear than wisdom that would dictate such a decision. Fear of being the next target of GW's lawyers, as they did with me. And I can see the reason of not wanting to rock the boat if you have already shackled yourself to it. These contracts too have basically become industry standard now because they work so well. Content creators are implicitly expected to be neutral individuals, unaffiliated with the companies they cover, just simple dudes, and thus inherently more trustworthy than the media. The content creators were supposed to be us, our representatives. But both in 40k, where once more we know there are contracts, we also recently saw an example with Total War Warhammer, where CA has apparently been paying content creators to take part in bug testing. And seeing the state of Warhammer 3 right now, with primary factions not even being able to recruit units because of years-old bugs, we know damn well that bug fixing was not the main reason they collected a paycheck. It was because the companies have now realized that the easiest way to control content creators is to lure them in with a contract. To say, hey, you can get exclusive access to things, you can get protections. And when you've signed it, remember what a shithole you will look like if that fact ever comes out. So you'd better stay on our side. And hey, that is a strong incentive. Protection from the company's all too frequent predation, and exclusive access to new information with which to make videos. There are many, many advantages to towing the line, even when not directly under contract. Again, I know, because when I first started my lore channel, I had GW employees acknowledging me openly, recommending me even. I had a direct Skype contact to Creative Assembly. They invited me to one of their exclusive influencer tours in England. Food, drinks, hotels, and all the things not at all meant to influence your opinions, of course. I was already intending to simply speak my mind on matters, and so I never went. And it is often forgotten too, but in many ways, I was one of the first who directly inspired many of the creators that came behind me, even if they shared none of my motivations for it, as I proved you could do Warhammer lore and succeed on YouTube. It's very old lore by now, but it was even after a brief beef with me that Lewitton started doing 40k lore. At the time, I was mainly doing Warhammer Fantasy, as I was excited again for Total War Warhammer, and I was out competing channels far older and far larger than my own, dedicated Total War channels with exclusive access to trailers and interviews with CA. If I was doing that well, with none of that backing, none of that exclusivity, how well could I have done if I had shut up? If I had towed the line and never addressed the creeping political cancer in entertainment? what I was called paranoid at the time for saying, as it seemed impossible that any of this would ever reach 40k. We will never know for certain, but I think it pretty likely that I gave up a very cushy future. And why? Well, again, simply because I love Warhammer. I love gaming. I love the entertainment we used to have. And I knew deep down that if I just sat by and did nothing, and I thought to myself, well, somebody else will do what I am too cowardly to do, then I'd probably start freaking out. Going slowly batshit insane as the things I loved were all reduced and torn and sundered before me as I sat there smiling. And hey, luckily there were many others that agreed with me and who also decided to fight back, and the war against wokeism is right now seeming to be proceeding towards a solid victory. And I am sure it would have done so even without me, but it would have made me climb the fucking walls. And so for the last 10 years, I have been doing my part, as have all of you watching. You've all been doing your parts too. But if we are to achieve anything more within 40k, I believe it is time to realize that neutrality is not a virtue in our modern day cultural conflict. And if we ever wish for it to become one again, then we must first enforce the tyranny of neutrality upon Games Workshop and their ilk. And that tyranny means we are going to have standards again. I don't expect this to change any minds amongst the content creators. I don't expect most of them could change their minds even if they wanted to at this point. But I do hope the moral condemnation of the flock of ostriches with their heads either firmly buried, turned to the left, or dug up GW's ass will make you, the viewer, start to ask some questions. Because you are not the one being paid by GW or by Creative Assembly. You are not the one receiving sponsorships or converting an evening of wiki reading into a product you wish to push to the maximum number of people. But you are the primary victim of this. It is your hobby that is being destroyed here. It is the universe that you love, be it Warhammer, Star Wars, Star Trek, Vampire, or any other aspect of geekdom like gaming, music, anime, movies. It is all these things that are being ground down and reduced to slop. And none of this is theoretical. We have seen the effects of uncontrolled mass tourism into all of these things, with changes being made for political reasons or because the flavor of, say, 40k is unpalatable to a normie's tastes. Because at the end of the day, if you really do want Warhammer to be for everyone, for the maximum number of people, then it will soon just be bland cardboard. It will be nothing but memes and tongue-in-cheek references to barely understood lore, where the history, the universe, the canon does not matter, where indeed the canon is not even real. Because a greater number of outsiders, tourists, casuals, decided that representation matter more than the integrity of the thing you love. That skin color in a game that revolves around grey plastic models that you may paint in any shade you so desire was more important than the integrity of the universe. Public outcry has proven repeatedly, categorically, to be just about the only thing that companies listen to. The left has gone on to demonstrate this for 10 years, and by now we must have learned the lesson. And if that public outcry can be stifled effectively by simply taking over and buying out the community figures that so often organize it, then we must have conversations like the one we've just had. We must ask ourselves if it is not time to more closely observe the actions of the content creators, of those who profess to be your representatives. To ask for more from them, to ask for more passion, and for them quite simply to be more effective in maintaining the thing we all love, not just for tomorrow, but for the future, against the dangers we again can all so obviously see. And hey, if you disagree with me in everything I've said so far, well, I suppose you should be yelling at me now. Until next time, I have been Arch. Thank you all very much for listening, and I hope to see a lot of you again soon. Have a good day.